You think we know the story. One God, the Lord, the Almighty, the center of everything. But what if I told you that underneath the veneer of this singular faith, the Bible itself is haunted by divine counsel, a pantheon of ancient gods locked in a cosmic struggle for power? What if the sacred text you read is not a clean singular revelation, but a battleground? A document repeatedly hijacked, rewritten, and manipulated by ancient scribes desperate to crown their own God, Yahweh, as the undisputed ruler. This is a story of how a small, desert-born deity muscled his way to the top of the cosmic hierarchy. This is the story of propaganda, written in ink that is thousands of years old. Dr. Kip Davis has pulled back the curtain in his crucial new work, God's Propaganda. I'll be taking a look at some highlights from the book and adding my own analysis of how the biblical authors incorporated older myths into their writings. I've studied propaganda techniques that biblical authors used to destroy their competition extensively. They fall into 4 hard-hitting categories. Think of them as the ancient redactor's toolkit. Conflation. This is the merger. It's taking 2 gods, say God A and God B, and transferring God A's greatest hits to God B until they are indistinguishable. 1 God, 2 names. Elimination. The kill shot. This is when an author doesn't just deny a god's power, they remove them entirely. They kill them off, make them human, or simply declare they never existed. Substitution. The name swap. Erase the name of the rival god and write in the name of your guy, your title, your authority. A clean, surgical rewrite. Rivalry. Direct conflict. A divine cage match where the narrative is structured to show who is stronger, who is more powerful, and who deserves the throne. It's an internal coup, and you can see the carnage still smoking in the Psalms. Let's go to Psalm 82. This text is ground zero for understanding the divine council. We have the central figure Elohim pronouncing judgment on other gods. Dr. Kip translates it in Elohim. In other words, Dr. Kip doesn't see this as a title for a god, but rather a reference to one of the many gods present in this psalm. I agree with the core premise. This text did not begin as a monument to a singular monotheistic God, but I think the evidence points to something even more aggressive than a simple description of a God. As I've detailed before, the word Elohim is often a redactional placeholder. A late, nervous scribe goes in and performs the substitution technique. They remove the original, highly problematic name, a rival god, and write in the generic title, Elohim. So who was removed? My bet is Baal. Baal was El's primary rival in the broader ancient Near Eastern mythology, constantly seeking to usurp the high god El, and we see El mentioned in this very psalm, at least in the Masoretic text. So let's peel back that first layer. Let's reverse the substitution and read the text as it likely existed in its original radical form. Baal stands in the assembly of El. He pronounces judgment among the gods. You are gods. You are all sons of the Most High. You will certainly die like humans and fall like any prince. Arise, O Baal, judge the earth, because all the nations belong to you. Do you see the elimination technique in action? The text is murdering the competition. Baal, the upstart, is killing off the other sons of El, the gods who were originally assigned to oversee the surrounding nations. By having them die like humans, Baal erases their authority and claims their land rights. All nations belong to Baal. It's a divine land grab, a hostile takeover of the cosmos. Now let's look at the later second layer. A redactor, the same one who wrote Elohim over Baal, interrupts the flow of divine judgment. This new section shifts the focus away from the council and toward earthly concerns, local justice for the poor and needy. Why? Because the redactor is using a brilliant piece of counter-propaganda. By changing the context, they want the reader to believe these were never gods at all, but merely unjust human rulers in Israel. And it worked. Centuries later, the Gospel of John and modern interpreters read it exactly that way. Propaganda success. The memory of the divine council was sanitized. Let's turn to one of the oldest, most archaic texts in the Bible, the Song of Moses in Deuteronomy 32. Instead of killing off the rival gods, this text uses another strategy to get Israel out from under El's authority. The earliest layer describes the formation of the nations. When the Most High gave nations their land, when he divided the descendants of Adam, He set up borders for the tribes corresponding to the number of the sons of Elohim. Again, that familiar placeholder, Elohim. But which name was replaced this time? The Yahwist author gives us the answer in verse 4, where they employ conflation. It reads, "He is a faithful El, who does no wrong." The Yahwist is intentionally equating Yahweh with El, the high God. The divine identity is being merged. The original line, therefore, almost certainly read, "Sons of El." Now look at verse 9, the crucial turning point. This is where Yahweh claims his people. For Yahweh's portion is his people. Jacob is the allotment of his inheritance. The standard reading, that Yahweh received this portion from the Most High El, implies Yahweh is simply a son of El, another minor deity on the council. But the Hebrew doesn't require that. I believe a more accurate reading of the Yahwist intent is this: but Yahweh's people were his property. Jacob was his own possession. The sound of independence echoes throughout that line. Yahweh didn't receive a portion from El. He owned one, separate and distinct. El assigned his sons to his nations, and Yahweh had his own, whom he acquired himself. The verses that follow support this. Yahweh doesn't receive the people from some handoff. He finds them in the desert. He stumbles upon them, claims them, and raises them up. He's not operating on El's organizational chart. He is a rogue deity carving out his own kingdom. The next layer is the Deuteronomist, which discusses how the Israelites worshipped other gods and were punished. The final layer is a late post-exilic redaction that denies that other gods exist, and basically trash talks other nations. This is typical of late post-exilic redactors, as the redactors seem to become more confident the longer they are past the exile. This layer progression is also typical of many texts in the Hebrew Bible, with the first layer asserting Yahweh's authority over Israel, the second layer explaining why the exile happened, and the third layer asserting Yahweh's authority over the entire world. Many scholars, including Dr. Kipp, think that the Song of Moses is one of the oldest texts in the Bible. I partially agree. As I've shown, there are layers to the song. Most of the old and archaic language is found in the first layer, but I think there are some other clues that this layer is quite old, and the El narrative that it references is even older. Israel is never mentioned in this layer, or in any of these layers for that matter. As I pointed out in my earlier video, Israel was integrated into Jacob. So since this song doesn't include the integration of Israel, it may indicate an earlier date. Also, the Exodus is never mentioned. It only says that Yahweh found them in the desert. Yes, the Exodus account does include a wandering in the desert, but that's not how he found them. Some might say this is simply poetic, but there is an argument in there too, that Yahweh didn't receive his people from El because he found them in the desert. But that's not the case according to the biblical narrative. There is a whole narrative about choosing Abraham, who goes to Canaan, then they go to Egypt, all before the desert narrative. This may indicate an earlier narrative about the tribe of Jacob that was found by Yahweh in the desert. The propaganda campaign shifts into high gear in Psalm 89. Verse 7 mentions El, the high God. Dr. Kip Davis reads this as a contrast, that no one, not even El, is like Yahweh. He reads it as, "Who is like Yahweh among the sons of the gods?" The answer is, no one, not even El. But I see two layers here, and instead of a contrast, I see a conflation of El and Yahweh. The first layer is a short text or saying about El. This layer is surrounded by the name of Yahweh in the second layer. It's a parallelism of sorts, equating the two gods into one, a common propaganda technique. Once the redactor establishes that El and Yahweh are the same, he goes through the things that El did and applies them to Yahweh, including the typical storm god versus the sea god conflict. You ruled the raging sea. You crushed Rahab. Rahab, the chaos dragon, the primordial sea monster. This is the ancient battle. Yahweh takes the victory story of the Canaanite storm god, the defeat of the sea, Yam, and claims it as his own. The takeover is now complete. The desert god is the sky god, the storm god, and the ancient sovereign. We see this same careful editorial hand at work in the oracles of Balaam in the book of Numbers. In Numbers 23, we have two prophecies. The first prophecy is a strategic Yahwistic insertion, a layer of propaganda whose sole purpose is to frame the second, older prophecy. This is done by inserting the first prophecy and then having Balak suggest a different place to prophesy. In the first prophecy, The Yahweh layer contains the parallelism that conflates El and Yahweh so that it's established before we get to the second prophecy, which was originally about the god El. The scribes didn't dare substitute El with Elohim. The prophecy was too famous, too well known. Instead, they insert a couple Yahwistic lines right into the middle of the El oracle, tainting the source. The El layer is also propaganda. Based on the emphasis of the propaganda, it seems that Balaam did in fact curse Israel. The El layer spins it, claiming Balaam was paid to curse them, but was divinely prevented from doing so. It's a cleanup job. It shows us one thing clearly. Before Yahweh was the God of Israel, El was the God of Israel. The reality of this multiple God universe isn't just in the Bible, it's written in the stone and plaster of the ancient Near East. In his book, Dr. Kip brings up the fascinating Balaam Inscription, discovered in Jordan, the Deir Allah inscription. It is an ancient text that recounts a vision received by the same Balaam that's mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. The text describes how divine beings warned Balaam of impending cosmic disaster, involving El's anger and the darkness falling upon the land. As you can see, it's quite fragmentary, so unfortunately we don't have the full text. Dr. Kip proposes that the Israelites emerged out of the collapse of early Iron Age cities, and that much of the Hebrew Bible emerged away from centralized institutions. Since writing was considered rare and mostly among the elite living in cities, Dr. Kip points to the Balaam inscription as evidence that writing was known outside of elite circles. However, in my opinion, the Balaam inscription is also propaganda. Since the text is so fragmentary, it is difficult to reconstruct what the propaganda was trying to do. But we can still see the editorial hand. One line says, "Why do you fast and why do you weep?" This is a common propaganda technique I refer to as begging the answer. The writer knows Balaam was fasting and weeping. The fact is not in dispute, but the reason they provide in the following line is almost certainly the propaganda, designed to manipulate the established fact. Furthermore, a line like, "And he beheld a vision in accordance with El's utterance," feels like an insertion, a redaction done before or as it was inscribed. The main narrative is about Balaam visiting Sheol, the afterlife, and receiving information from a group of gods. El isn't central to that. Within the same line, we are told that it was a vision. I've seen this before in Enoch, where one of the redactors turns Enoch's experience into a vision so that he could better manipulate its meaning. The Balaam inscription mentions Sheol a few times, indicating that Balaam may have visited there. Later redactors don't seem to like when characters visit the afterlife and return. That seems to be the same case, not only in Enoch, but with Job as well. In my blog post about Job, I explain how the narrative was changed so that it's no longer about the death and resurrection of Job. The point being that the Balaam inscription seems to contain a level of sophistication that makes it less likely to have been produced outside of elite circles. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe.